Sarah Martinez stood at the edge of the crowded bar, her fingers wrapped tightly around a beer bottle that had grown warm in her grip. The American Legion Hall buzzed with the familiar sounds of veterans swapping stories, their laughter echoing off the wood-paneled walls. She had come here hoping to find some sense of belonging, some connection to the brotherhood she had once known. Instead, she found herself an outsider looking in. "You see that woman over there?" The voice carried across the room, loud enough for Sarah to hear every word. "Claims she was a SEAL. Can you believe that?" Sarah's stomach tightened. She recognized the speaker, a burly man named Rick Thompson who seemed to hold court wherever veterans gathered. His voice dripped with disdain as he continued his commentary. "Women can't be SEALs. Never have been, never will be. These wannabes make me sick, stealing valor from real warriors." A few men around him nodded in agreement. Sarah felt the familiar burn of shame and anger rise in her chest. This wasn't the first time she'd faced such accusations, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. The truth was complicated, buried beneath layers of classified operations and official denials that she couldn't challenge without breaking oaths she'd sworn to keep. She set down her beer and headed toward the exit, but Rick's voice stopped her. "Hey, fake SEAL. Where you going? Don't want to tell us about your imaginary missions?" Sarah turned slowly, her training keeping her movements controlled despite the rage building inside her. "I never claimed to be anything I'm not." "Right." Rick's laugh was harsh. "So what unit were you with? What class did you graduate from? Come on, share your war stories." The room had gone quiet now, all eyes on Sarah. She could feel the weight of their skepticism, their judgment. These men had served their country with honor, and they saw her as someone trying to steal credit for sacrifices she'd never made. "I can't discuss my service record," Sarah said quietly. "Of course you can't." Rick stood up, his considerable frame casting a shadow across the floor. "Because there's nothing to discuss. You're just another fraud trying to impress people with lies." Sarah's hands clenched into fists, but she forced them to relax. She'd learned long ago that fighting would only make things worse. Instead, she walked toward the door, each step feeling like a retreat from a battle she couldn't win. Outside in the parking lot, Sarah sat in her pickup truck and let the tears come. 3 years had passed since her last mission, 3 years since everything went wrong in that compound in Afghanistan. 3 years since she'd watched her team die and somehow survived to tell a story no one would believe. The official records showed no trace of her existence in the teams. The mission had been so classified that it officially never happened. The men she'd served with were listed as dying in a training accident, not in the heroic firefight that had actually taken their lives. And Sarah herself had been erased, her service record scrubbed clean to maintain operational security. She understood the necessity of it. The mission they'd been on could have started a war if the truth came out. But understanding didn't make the isolation any easier to bear. Sarah drove home through empty streets, past the small apartment she'd rented in this military town hoping to find some sense of community. Instead, she'd found suspicion and hostility from the very people who should have understood her best. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. She almost deleted it without reading, but something made her look. Meet me at Murphy's Diner tomorrow, 7 a.m. Come alone. A friend. Sarah stared at the message, her mind racing. It could be a prank, or worse, someone looking to expose her further. But something about the timing felt significant. She'd been feeling more desperate lately, more isolated. Maybe someone was finally reaching out. She spent a restless night tossing in bed, memories of Afghanistan mixing with dreams of her current struggles. In her dreams, she was back in the compound, watching helplessly as insurgents overwhelmed her position. She could see Tommy Rodriguez trying to reach her, could hear Jake Williams calling for backup that would never come. She woke at 5:30, her sheets soaked with sweat. The nightmares had been getting worse lately, probably triggered by the stress of her current situation. She showered and dressed carefully, choosing clothes that would help her blend in but still allow her to move quickly if needed. Murphy's Diner sat on the edge of town, the kind of place where truckers and early-rising locals gathered for coffee and gossip. Sarah arrived 10 minutes early, choosing a booth in the back corner where she could watch the entrance. Old habits died hard. At exactly 7 o'clock, a man walked through the door. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She recognized him immediately, though he looked older, grayer than she remembered. Commander Marcus Webb had been her commanding officer during her early training, before she'd been selected for the special assignment that had ended her career. He spotted her and walked over, his gait still military straight despite his civilian clothes. When he slid into the booth across from her, Sarah could see the weight of years in his eyes. "Sarah Martinez," he said quietly. "Or should I call you Ghost? That was your call sign, wasn't it?" Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. Ghost. No one had called her that in 3 years. No one was supposed to know that name existed. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said automatically. Webb smiled sadly. "We need to talk. There are things you don't know, things that happened after your extraction from Afghanistan." The waitress approached, and Webb ordered black coffee. Sarah asked for the same, her mind reeling. How did he know about Afghanistan? How did he know about Ghost Protocol? After the waitress left, Webb leaned forward. "I know you've been struggling. I know people think you're lying about your service. I'm here to tell you that you're not alone." "I can't discuss classified operations," Sarah said carefully. "The classification has been lifted. Partially, anyway. Enough for you to know that your service is finally being recognized, at least in certain circles." Sarah felt dizzy. "What are you talking about?" Webb reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. He placed it on the table between them but didn't open it. 3 years ago, you and your team conducted Operation Sandcastle in Afghanistan. You were inserted to gather intelligence on a high-value target. The mission went sideways when your position was compromised. Sarah's throat felt dry. "How do your team fought for 18 hours against overwhelming odds? Tommy Rodriguez, Jake Williams, Maria Santos, David Chen, and Alex Murphy all died defending their position and protecting the intel you'd gathered. You held the line until extraction, saving crucial intelligence that prevented a terrorist attack on American soil." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. Hearing their names spoken aloud after 3 years of silence felt like a dam breaking inside her chest. "The mission was classified beyond top secret," Webb continued. "Your identities were scrubbed to protect ongoing operations. But the people who matter know what you did. They know what your team sacrificed." "Then, why?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Why has everyone called me a liar? Why have I been left to face this alone?" Webb's expression darkened. "Because someone made a mistake. Your handler was supposed to provide you with a cover story, a service record that would explain your training and capabilities without revealing classified details. That never happened. You were left hanging in the wind." Sarah stared at the folder. "What's in there?" "Your new identity. Or rather, your old identity, restored. The Department of Defense has created a service record for you. Nothing classified, but enough to show that you served with distinction in special operations. You'll never be able to tell the whole truth, but you won't have to live as a ghost anymore." The weight of 3 years seemed to lift slightly from Sarah's shoulders. She reached for the folder with trembling hands. "There's more," Webb said. "The reason I'm here personally. I've been authorized to offer you a position. The military is starting a new program, and they need someone with your particular set of skills." Sarah looked up from the folder. "What kind of program?" "Training. We're finally moving forward with integrating women into special operations. We need someone who's been there, who knows what it takes. We need someone who can show them it's possible." Sarah felt a flutter of hope for the first time in years. "You want me to train female candidates? I want you to lead the program. Full colonel's commission, your own command. You'd be building something from the ground up, something that could change the military forever." The offer hung in the air between them. Sarah thought about the women she'd met over the years, talented soldiers who'd been denied opportunities because of their gender. She thought about the young girls who might grow up in a world where their dreams weren't limited by other people's prejudices. "Why me?" she asked. Webb's smile was genuine this time. Because you've already proven it can be done. Because you've survived not just combat, but 3 years of being told you don't exist. That takes a special kind of strength. Sarah looked around the diner, at the ordinary people starting their ordinary days. For 3 years, she'd felt like she was watching life from the outside, unable to participate because of secrets she couldn't share and a service record that didn't exist. When would this start, she asked. Immediately, if you accept. The first class of candidates is already selected. They're waiting for their instructor. Sarah thought about the men at the American Legion, about Rick Thompson's sneering dismissal. She thought about all the times she'd bitten her tongue when someone called her a fraud. But, mostly, she thought about her fallen teammates and the sacrifice they'd made. I accept, she said. Webb nodded and stood up. Report to Fort Bragg Monday morning. Ask for Building 1247. They'll be expecting you. As he walked away, Sarah opened the folder and began reading her new service record. It wasn't the whole truth, it couldn't be. But it was enough. Enough to show that she'd served, that she'd earned her place among warriors. She thought about going back to the American Legion that night, about facing Rick Thompson with her new documentation. But she realized it didn't matter anymore. She had something more important than their acceptance, she had a mission again. Sarah finished her coffee and walked out into the morning sunlight. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like she was moving forward instead of just surviving. She had work to do, women to train, barriers to break down. The ghost was finally coming back to life. 2 days later, Sarah stood outside Building 1247 at Fort Bragg, wearing her dress uniform for the first time in years. The medals felt heavy on her chest, each one representing a piece of her service that had finally been acknowledged. Inside the building, she found a conference room filled with military brass and civilian officials. At the head of the table sat Commander Webb, now wearing his Navy uniform with Admiral's insignia. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced as Sarah entered, I'd like you to meet Colonel Sarah Martinez, the new commander of the Women's Special Operations Training Program. The room erupted in applause. Sarah felt tears threatening again, but this time they were tears of pride rather than pain. She was home. 6 months into her new role, Sarah stood on the observation deck watching 12 women push through the most grueling training the military had ever designed. Below her, the candidates crawled through mud under razor wire, their faces streaked with sweat and determination. Each one had volunteered for a program that officially didn't exist, knowing they were pioneers in uncharted territory. The training facility at Fort Bragg had been modified specifically for this program. Sarah had insisted on using the same standards as male special operations candidates, no modifications, no accommodations. If these women were going to earn their place among elite warriors, they would do it the same way men did. How are they holding up? Admiral Webb asked, joining Sarah on the observation deck. Better than expected, Sarah replied, watching as Sergeant First Class Jennifer Kim helped a struggling teammate over a wall obstacle. We started with 24 candidates. 12 are still here. That's actually a better retention rate than most male classes. Sarah nodded, but her attention was focused on the women below. Each one had a story that brought her here. Kim had been an Army Ranger who'd been denied opportunities for advancement. Lieutenant Maria Vasquez had been a Navy pilot grounded because of outdated regulations. Staff Sergeant Ashley Brooks had been a Marine Force recon operator who'd watched male colleagues get assignments she was better qualified for. They all carried the same weight Sarah had, the burden of having to be twice as good to be considered half as equal. There's something else we need to discuss, Webb said, his tone shifting. We've got a problem. Sarah turned away from the window. What kind of problem? Political. There are people in Congress who want to shut down this program before it really gets started. They're questioning the cost, the necessity, the timing. And they want a demonstration. Something to prove these women can actually perform at the level we claim. Sarah felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. What kind of demonstration? Webb handed her a classified folder. There's a situation developing. A high-value terrorist target has been located in Syria. Intelligence suggests he's planning an attack on American interests within the next 2 weeks. Sarah opened the folder and scanned the briefing materials. The target was Hassan al-Rashid, a bomb maker responsible for at least 6 attacks on American military installations. He was hiding in a compound in northern Syria, protected by a network of tunnels and heavily armed guards. "This looks like a job for Delta Force or DevGru," Sarah said. "It would be, except for one thing. Al-Rashid has surrounded himself with women and children as human shields. Our intelligence suggests the only way to get close to him without triggering a massacre is to send in a team that won't be seen as a direct threat." Sarah understood immediately. "You want to use my trainees?" "Not all of them. A select team of 4, plus you as team leader. The mission would be to infiltrate the compound, neutralize al-Rashid, and extract without civilian casualties." Sarah looked back at the women training below. They were good, better than good. But they weren't finished with their training. They weren't ready for live combat. When would this happen? 72 hours. The intelligence window won't stay open much longer. Sarah closed the folder and handed it back to Webb. "I need time to think about this." "Sarah, I know what I'm asking. But if these women succeed, if they prove they can handle a mission like this, it changes everything. Every door that's been closed to women in the military opens up. And if they fail? If someone dies?" Webb's expression was grim. "Then, the program gets shut down, and we go back to the old way of doing things." That evening, Sarah called her top 4 candidates into her office. Kim, Vasquez, Brooks, and Corporal Lisa Chen sat in chairs arranged in a semicircle, their faces showing the exhaustion of 6 months of intensive training. "I'm going to tell you about an opportunity," Sarah began. "It's dangerous, it's classified, and it's completely voluntary. If you choose to participate and succeed, you'll make history. If you choose not to participate, there will be no judgment and no consequences for your career." She outlined the mission in broad terms, watching their faces for reactions. Kim leaned forward, her eyes sharp with interest. Vasquez's jaw tightened with determination. Brooks sat back with arms crossed, analytical. Chen looked nervous but resolute. "When do we leave?" Kim asked. "I haven't said yes yet," Sarah replied. "But you're considering it," Vasquez said. "You wouldn't have called us in here otherwise." Sarah looked at each of them. These women had sacrificed everything to be here. They'd endured months of training that would break most people, all for the chance to prove they belonged among elite warriors. "The mission is real," Sarah said finally. "The target is a legitimate threat to American lives. This isn't a publicity stunt, it's a genuine special operations mission with all the risks that entails." Brooks spoke up. "What's our success rate if we go?" "Honestly? Unknown. The intelligence is good, but the situation is fluid. There are too many variables to give you a solid number." "But you think we can do it?" Chen asked quietly. Sarah studied the young corporal. Chen was the smallest of the group, barely meeting the minimum height requirements. But she was also the best marksman Sarah had ever seen and had demonstrated an uncanny ability to remain calm under extreme stress. "I think you're as ready as anyone can be for something like this." But ready and prepared are 2 different things. You're 6 months into a program that usually takes 2 years. "Ma'am," Kim said, with respect, "most special operations soldiers don't get to choose their first real mission. They train as best they can and, then, they go when called." "How is this different?" Sarah smiled despite herself. Kim was right, of course. No one was ever truly ready for combat. You trained until the shooting started, and then you relied on your skills, your teammates, and luck. "It's different because of what it represents," Sarah said. "If you succeed, every woman who comes after you will have opportunities that didn't exist before. If we fail as individuals, not as representatives of our entire gender," Vasquez interrupted. "Men fail missions too. It doesn't disqualify all men from special operations." Brooks nodded. "The pressure is already there, ma'am. Every day in training, every exercise, every evaluation, we know we're being judged not just as soldiers but as women soldiers. This mission just makes that explicit. Sarah looked at Chen, who had been quiet through most of the discussion. What do you think, Corporal? Chen took a deep breath. I think about my little sister, ma'am. She's 16 and wants to be a Marine. Right now, there are jobs she can't do, missions she can't be part of, not because she's not capable but because no one's proven women can do them. Maybe this is how we prove it. The room fell silent. Sarah felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. These women were ready to risk everything for a chance to prove themselves. But, was she ready to risk their lives? I need tonight to think about it, Sarah said. I'll give you my answer in the morning. That night, Sarah walked the empty training grounds, her mind churning with possibilities and risks. She found herself at the memorial wall where the names of Special Operations soldiers killed in action were engraved. Her eyes found the section where her teammates' names should have been, the blank space that represented their classified sacrifice. Her phone rang. Unknown number again. Hello? Sarah? It's Tommy. Sarah nearly dropped the phone. Tommy Rodriguez had died in Afghanistan 3 years ago. She'd watched him bleed out in that compound. Who is this? It's really me, Sarah. I know this is a shock, but I need you to listen. Sarah's legs felt weak. She sat down heavily on a nearby bench. Tommy died. I saw him die. I was badly wounded, but I survived. The military needed everyone to believe I was dead for security reasons. I've been in hiding for 3 years, undergoing reconstructive surgery and therapy. Sarah's mind raced. Prove it. Tell me something only Tommy would know. You have a scar on your left shoulder from when you fell off your bike when you were 8. You told me about it during our first training exercise when I asked about the mark I could see under your shirt sleeve. Sarah's breath caught. She had told Tommy that story, but only after she'd known him for months and trusted him completely. Tommy? Is it really you? It's me, Ghost. I've been watching the news about your program. I'm proud of you. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. I thought you were all dead. I thought I was the only survivor. As far as the official record goes, I am dead. And I need to stay that way for now. But I heard about the mission they're offering your team, and I had to reach out. How do you know about that? I still have contacts. Sarah, that compound they want to send you to, I've been there. Sarah straightened up. What? Al-Rashid isn't just hiding there. He's planning something big, bigger than they're telling you. The mission isn't just about taking him out, it's about stopping an attack that could kill thousands of people. Tommy, I don't understand. How are you involved in this? I've been working undercover for the past year, trying to infiltrate Al-Rashid's network. I can't complete the mission myself, my cover is blown. But I can help your team. Sarah felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with new intelligence. What kind of help? I know the compound layout. I know the guard rotations. More importantly, I know how to get you close to Al-Rashid without triggering the explosive devices he's rigged throughout the building. Explosive devices? The intel they gave you is incomplete. Al-Rashid is prepared to blow the entire compound if he feels threatened. The women and children aren't just human shields, they're potential casualties of a dead man's switch. Sarah's blood ran cold. How many explosives are we talking about? Enough to level 3 city blocks. Sarah, if this mission goes wrong, it won't just be your team that dies. It could be hundreds of innocent civilians. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. The mission had just become infinitely more complicated. Can you get me the information I need? I can do better than that. I can guide your team through the compound remotely. I've got surveillance access that your handlers don't know about. Tommy, if you're caught helping us, I'm already dead, remember? They can't kill me twice. Sarah heard the old humor in his voice, the same dark comedy that had gotten them through countless dangerous situations. I'll need to verify this with Admiral Webb, she said. No, Sarah. Webb doesn't know I'm alive. Neither do your other handlers. This has to stay between us until the mission is complete. Then, how do I know you're not compromised? How do I know this isn't a trap? There was a long pause. Then, Tommy said something that sent chills down Sarah's spine, because we're family, Ghost. And, family doesn't leave family behind. Sarah ended the call and sat in the darkness, her mind spinning with new information and impossible choices. Her team was undertaking a mission that was more dangerous than anyone knew, with intelligence from a teammate who was supposed to be dead. The next morning, Sarah called her team back into her office. Their faces showed they'd spent the night thinking about the mission, weighing risks and possibilities. We're going, Sarah announced without preamble. But, there are things about this mission that are more complicated than we initially understood. She outlined what Tommy had told her, leaving out his identity but sharing the crucial intelligence about the explosives and the increased civilian danger. Kim whistled low. So we're not just conducting a targeted elimination. We're defusing a potential mass casualty situation. That's right. The stakes are higher than we thought, and the margin for error is essentially zero. Brooks leaned forward. Do we trust this new intelligence source? Sarah met her eyes. With my life. And yours. Vasquez nodded slowly. When do we deploy? Tomorrow night. We'll have 18 hours to plan and prepare once we reach the staging area. Chen raised her hand slightly. Ma'am, are we still doing this to prove women can handle special operations? Sarah smiled grimly. No, Corporal. We're doing this because we're the best team available for this particular mission. The fact that we're all women is secondary. Brooks grinned. I like that better. As the team filed out to begin their mission preparations, Sarah felt a familiar sensation, the calm focus that came before a high-stakes operation. For the first time in 3 years, she was going back into combat. But, this time, she wasn't alone. She had a team, a mission, and a chance to save lives. She also had a ghost from her past guiding her forward into an uncertain future. The helicopter flew low over the Syrian desert, its rotors cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah and her team sat in tactical silence, each woman focused on the mission ahead. The aircraft would drop them 12 kilometers from the target compound, far enough to avoid detection but close enough to reach the objective before sunrise. Sarah's earpiece crackled with static, then Tommy's familiar voice came through on an encrypted channel. Ghost, this is Guardian. Radio check. Guardian, this is Ghost. I copy you 5 by 5. Her team exchanged glances. They'd been briefed that they would have remote support from an intelligence asset, but Tommy's identity remained classified even from them. Team Valkyrie, stand by for insertion, the pilot's voice announced over the intercom. Sarah looked at her team one final time. Kim checked her rifle and adjusted her night vision goggles. Vasquez ran through a mental checklist of the explosives she carried. Brooks tested the communication equipment that would keep them connected to both Command and Tommy. Chen made final adjustments to her sniper rifle, her movements precise and confident. Remember, Sarah said over their tactical frequency, we go in quiet, we complete the mission, and we all come home. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. We stick to the plan. The helicopter touched down briefly, and the 5 women fast-roped to the ground with practiced efficiency. Within 30 seconds, the aircraft was gone, leaving them alone in the hostile desert. Tommy's voice guided them through the darkness. Ghost, move northeast 200 meters to the wadi. That will give you concealed approach to the compound perimeter. Sarah signaled her team, and they moved in tactical formation through the rocky terrain. The months of training showed in their movement, silent, coordinated, professional. They covered the 12 kilometers in just over 2 hours, arriving at their overwatch position as the first hint of dawn appeared on the eastern horizon. The compound sat in a valley below them, surrounded by high walls and guard towers. Sarah studied it through her scope while Brooks set up their communication relay and Chen found her sniper position. Guardian, we have visual on the target. Confirm layout against our briefing materials. Ghost, Be advised the layout has changed since your last intelligence update. Al-Rashid has added 2 additional guard posts on the north and east walls. Also, I'm detecting increased electronic chatter. They may be expecting something. Sarah's jaw tightened. Changed security meant their carefully rehearsed plan was already compromised. Guardian, how recent are these changes? Within the last 6 hours. Someone may have leaked information about the operation. Kim moved up beside Sarah. Ma'am, if there's a leak, should we abort? Sarah weighed the options. If they aborted, Al-Rashid might disappear again, and his planned attack would proceed. If they continued with compromised intelligence, they could be walking into a trap. Guardian, what's your assessment of the threat level? The additional security suggests they're nervous, but not that they know about your specific mission. I think someone warned them about general American military activity in the region. Sarah made her decision. We continue, but we modify the approach. Vasquez, can you take out those new guard posts without alerting the main compound? Give me 10 minutes and a clear line of sight. Brooks, I need you to jam their communications during the breach. Chen, you're our overwatch. If this goes sideways, you get us out. The team moved into position with the fluid coordination of veterans, despite their relative inexperience. Sarah felt proud watching them adapt to changing circumstances without panic or hesitation. Tommy's voice provided constant updates as they approached the compound. Ghost, the target is in the main building, 2nd floor, northeast corner room. But, Sarah, I need to warn you about something else. What is it, Guardian? I've been monitoring Al-Rashid's communications. He's not planning one attack, he's planning 12 simultaneous attacks across 6 countries. The compound contains operational details for all of them. Sarah's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about preventing one terrorist attack. If they could capture Al-Rashid's intelligence, they could prevent a coordinated international incident that might claim thousands of lives. Guardian, we'll need time to collect intelligence materials. Understood. But, be advised, Al-Rashid has a dead man switch for the explosives. If his heart rate stops or if he doesn't check in every 30 minutes, the compound goes up automatically. Sarah relayed this information to her team. The mission had just become exponentially more complex. They needed to capture Al-Rashid alive, secure his intelligence materials, evacuate the civilian hostages, and disable the explosive devices, all before Al-Rashid's next check-in, which was in 47 minutes. Vasquez moved like a shadow along the compound's perimeter, using specialized equipment to neutralize the guards at the new positions without triggering alarms. Her training as a demolitions expert included advanced knowledge of pressure points and nerve clusters, skills that proved invaluable for silent takedowns. Brooks established electronic countermeasures, creating a bubble of interference that would prevent the compound's security systems from communicating with outside forces. Her background in cyber warfare had taught her to think of electronic systems as just another battlefield. Chen positioned herself on a ridge 800 meters from the compound, her sniper rifle providing overwatch for the entire operation. She'd proven during training that she could make accurate shots at twice that distance, and her psychological profile showed she remained calm under extreme pressure. Kim accompanied Sarah for the actual breach, her expertise in close-quarters combat making her the ideal partner for the dangerous work ahead. Guardian, we're in position. Final check on civilian locations? Ghost, I count 18 non-combatants in the main building. 12 are women and children being held on the ground floor. 6 are household staff in various locations. All are rigged with proximity explosives that will detonate if they move more than 5 meters from their current positions. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. Al-Rashid hadn't just surrounded himself with human shields, he'd turned them into living booby traps. Any rescue attempt would trigger explosions that would kill the very people they were trying to save. Can you guide us to the devices? Negative, Ghost. The triggers are medical devices attached to each hostage. They're designed to look like medical monitors, so the hostages don't know they're wearing bombs. Kim spoke quietly over their tactical frequency. Ma'am, how do we save people who don't know they need saving? It was a question that cut to the heart of special operations work. Sometimes the most dangerous missions weren't against enemy soldiers, but to protect innocent people who didn't understand the danger they faced. One step at a time, Sarah replied. We get to Al-Rashid first. Everything else flows from that. Sarah and Kim entered the compound through a drainage tunnel that Tommy had identified. The underground passage was cramped and filled with standing water, but it brought them directly into the main building without triggering perimeter alarms. They emerged in a basement storage room filled with cases of ammunition and explosive materials. Sarah photographed everything with a specialized camera that would help intelligence analysts understand the scope of Al-Rashid's operation. Guardian, we're inside the main building. What's our route to the target? Ghost, proceed up the stairwell at the north end of the basement. The target is 2 floors up. Be advised, I'm detecting 4 guards between your position and the target. Sarah signaled Kim, and they moved through the building with practiced stealth. The first guard was neutralized silently at the base of the stairs. The second fell unconscious from a sleeper hold applied by Kim as they reached the first floor landing. As they approached the second floor, Sarah could hear voices speaking in Arabic. Tommy provided real-time translation through their earpieces. He's giving orders for the morning prayer service. Sarah, the hostages are about to be moved to a different location for religious observance. If they're moved more than 5 meters from their current positions, the bombs go off, Sarah finished. How long do we have? 3 minutes until they start moving people. Sarah and Kim reached the hallway outside Al-Rashid's room. Through her scope, Chen had visual on 2 more guards at the far end of the corridor. Through hand signals, Sarah coordinated with her sniper to neutralize them simultaneously with her and Kim's assault on Al-Rashid's position. On my mark, Sarah whispered. 3, 2, 1, execute. Chen's rifle spoke once, dropping the distant guard instantly. Sarah and Kim breached Al-Rashid's door as his personal bodyguard fell to a perfectly placed shot from 800 meters away. Hassan al-Rashid looked up from his morning prayers, his eyes widening in shock as 2 armed women entered his sanctuary. He was smaller than Sarah had expected, a thin man in his 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes. American soldiers, he said in accented English. You are too late. My work is already complete. Your work is over, Sarah replied, keeping her rifle trained on him. We're here to stop your attacks. Al-Rashid smiled coldly. You cannot stop what has already begun. Even if you kill me, the operations will proceed. Kim moved to secure the room while Sarah approached Al-Rashid carefully. She could see he wore some kind of medical device on his wrist, undoubtedly connected to the compound's explosive system. Guardian, I need guidance on disabling the dead man switch. Tommy's voice was urgent. Ghost, the device on his wrist monitors heart rate, skin conductance, and movement. If any parameter goes outside normal range for more than 30 seconds, it triggers the explosives. Can you hack it? I'm trying, but it's a closed system. I need physical access to the device. Sarah looked at Al-Rashid, who was watching their conversation with obvious amusement. You think you are clever, he said. But you understand nothing. I am not afraid to die. Are you afraid to kill innocent people? It was the central dilemma of special operations. Sometimes the only way to save lives was to risk other lives. Sarah had faced this choice before, in that compound in Afghanistan where her teammates died. She'd chosen to complete the mission then, even knowing the cost. But this was different. This time, she had a team that could adapt, a support system that could help, and intelligence that gave them options. Kim, I need you to go downstairs and start evacuating the hostages. But don't move them more than 4 meters from where you find them. Ma'am, how am I supposed to evacuate people who can't move? We're going to bring the exit to them. Vasquez, do you copy? I copy, Ghost. I need you to blow a hole in the south wall of the building, ground floor. Make it big enough to drive a truck through, but shaped so that the blast doesn't affect the second floor. There was a pause. That's actually possible. But it'll take some creative engineering. How long? Give me 8 minutes. Sarah looked at the timer on Al-Rashid's device. 18 minutes until his next check-in. 8 minutes for Vasquez to prep the explosion. That left 10 minutes to evacuate 18 hostages, disable the proximity devices, and secure intelligence materials. Brooks, I need that communication jamming at maximum power. Nothing gets in or out of this compound. Already on it, Ghost. Sarah kept her weapon trained on Al-Rashid while monitoring her team's progress. She could hear Kim moving through the building below, speaking in multiple languages to the frightened hostages. Al-Rashid seemed genuinely puzzled by their tactics. You risk your lives for people you do not know. People who would not appreciate your sacrifice. That's what makes us different from you, Sarah replied. Guardian, are you making progress on that hack? I'm in the outer security protocols, but there are multiple layers of encryption. I need more time. Time we don't have. Sarah made a tactical decision. Kim, status on hostage locations? I've got eyes on all 18. They're distributed across 4 rooms on the ground floor. The children are scared but cooperative. When Vasquez blows the wall, you'll have a clear exit route to the outside. But you'll need to move the hostages simultaneously so the proximity devices don't detect displacement. Understood. I'll need help carrying the children. Chen, abandon Overwatch and get down there to assist Kim. On my way. Sarah could hear her sniper moving through the compound with the same silent efficiency she displayed during training. The team was functioning exactly as they'd prepared, adapting to circumstances while maintaining focus on the mission. Vasquez, status on the demolition? Charges are set. I've calculated the blast to create maximum egress with minimum structural damage to the upper floors. But, Ghost, you need to be aware, this explosion is going to trigger every alarm in a 50-kilometer radius. How long before we have company? Syrian military response will be at least 20 minutes. But, if there are other terrorist cells in the area, they could be here much sooner. Sarah looked at Al-Rashid, who had been listening to their radio traffic with growing concern. Despite his bravado, he clearly hadn't expected American Special Operations soldiers to show this level of coordination and tactical flexibility. Your plan is failing, he said, but his voice lacked the confidence he'd shown earlier. Guardian, any luck with the hack? I'm through 3 layers of security, but there are at least 2 more. The device is more sophisticated than we initially thought. Sarah checked her watch. 12 minutes until Al-Rashid's next check-in. She needed to make a decision about whether to risk trying to take him alive or to focus entirely on saving the hostages. Brooks, I need you to patch me through to Admiral Webb. Ghost, this is Eagle Base. Webb here. Admiral, we have the target secured, but the situation is more complex than briefed. Al-Rashid has intelligence on 12 coordinated attacks, but he's rigged the compound with enough explosives to level several city blocks. We can save the hostages or capture the intelligence, but probably not both. There was a long pause. What's your professional assessment, Colonel? Sarah looked around the room at Al-Rashid with his dead man switch, at the cases of documents that could prevent attacks across multiple countries, at the timer counting down toward a mass casualty event. We saved the lives in front of us, she said. Intelligence can be gathered again. People can't be brought back from the dead. Concur. Execute hostage rescue, then extract. Vasquez, blow it. The explosion shook the entire building. Sarah felt the floor shift beneath her feet, and dust rained down from the ceiling. But the structure held, and she could hear Kim and Chen moving people through the new opening in the wall below. Al-Rashid's eyes widened as he realized his human shields were escaping. You cannot do this. You will trigger the devices. Guardian, please tell me you have good news. I'm through the 4th layer. 1 more and I can disable the proximity sensors. How long? 2 minutes, maybe 3. Sarah watched the timer on Al-Rashid's wrist. 8 minutes until the next check-in. Through her earpiece, she could hear her team working efficiently to evacuate the hostages. Kim, status? 14 hostages successfully evacuated. 4 more in progress. Guardian, I need that hack now. I'm in. Disabling proximity sensors, now. Sarah felt a wave of relief as the indicator lights on al-Rashid's device changed from red to green. All hostages clear, Kim reported. Building is secure for explosive demolition. Sarah looked at al-Rashid, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the past few minutes. His master plan was collapsing around him, his hostages were free, and his compound was under American control. Guardian, can you disable the dead man switch without triggering the explosives? Working on it. This is the most sophisticated system I've ever encountered. Give me 90 seconds. Al-Rashid finally spoke. You think you have one, but you understand nothing. I am one man among many. Kill me or capture me, it makes no difference. The attacks will proceed. Sarah zip-tied his hands and began gathering the intelligence materials scattered around the room. Maybe. But 18 people are alive today because of what we did here. That's enough. Guardian, status on the dead man switch? 30 more seconds. The timer on al-Rashid's device showed 3 minutes until his next check-in. Sarah could hear helicopters in the distance, either American extraction or Syrian response forces. Guardian, we need to go. Almost there, got it. Dead man's switch is disabled. The compound is secure. Sarah felt the tension leave her body all at once. The mission was complete. They'd saved the hostages, captured the target, and secured intelligence materials that would help prevent future attacks. Team Valkyrie, this is Ghost. Mission complete. Rally at Extraction Point Alpha. As they moved through the compound toward the evacuation zone, Sarah felt Tommy's presence in her earpiece one more time. Ghost, this is Guardian. Outstanding work today. Thank you, Guardian. For everything. Sarah, Tommy's voice was softer now, more personal. I'm proud of you. Of all of you. You've shown the world what's possible. The extraction helicopters appeared on the horizon as Sarah's team reached the perimeter of the compound. Behind them, 18 rescued hostages were being loaded onto medical evacuation aircraft. Al-Rashid sat in flex cuffs, surrounded by boxes of intelligence materials that would keep analysts busy for months. Sarah looked at her team, Kim, Vasquez, Brooks, and Chen, and saw the same mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction she felt herself. They'd completed their first real mission together, under impossible circumstances, and proven that women could handle special operations at the highest level. But, more than that, they'd saved lives. In the end, that was what mattered most. 3 weeks after the Syrian mission, Sarah stood before a joint session of Congress in a closed-door hearing room. The overhead lights felt harsh after months of living in shadows, and the faces around the conference table represented some of the most powerful people in American government. Senator Patricia Morrison, the chairwoman of the Armed Services Committee, reviewed a classified briefing document while Sarah waited in silence. Her team sat behind her, Kim, Vasquez, Brooks, and Chen, still wearing their dress uniforms from the medal ceremony that had taken place an hour earlier. Colonel Martinez, Senator Morrison finally said, the committee has reviewed the after-action reports from Operation Sandcastle. The results were unexpected. Sarah kept her expression neutral. In what way, Senator? Your team accomplished the mission objectives with 0 casualties, rescued 18 hostages, prevented 12 coordinated terrorist attacks, and captured intelligence that has led to the arrest of 47 terrorist operatives across 6 countries. Morrison looked up from her notes. Frankly, those results would be impressive for any special operations unit. My team performed exceptionally well, Sarah agreed. Representative James Harrison, a vocal opponent of women in combat roles, leaned forward. Colonel, let's be honest about what happened here. You got lucky. The intelligence was perfect, the timing was ideal, and the enemy wasn't expecting female operators. Sarah felt Kim tense behind her, but she kept her own voice steady. Representative Harrison, there's no such thing as luck in special operations. There's preparation, adaptation, and execution. My team demonstrated all 3. But surely you'd agree that this was a unique situation, Harrison continued. The enemy's use of female hostages created an opportunity that wouldn't exist in most combat scenarios. Before Sarah could respond, Admiral Webb entered the hearing room. He moved to the front of the chamber and placed a folder on the table in front of Senator Morrison. "Senator, I apologize for the interruption, but new intelligence has come to light that bears directly on this hearing." Morrison opened the folder and scanned its contents. Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Admiral, are you certain about this information?" "Yes, ma'am. It's been verified through multiple sources." Sarah watched this exchange with growing curiosity. Webb hadn't mentioned any new intelligence when they'd spoken that morning. "Colonel Martinez," Senator Morrison said, "are you familiar with the name Tommy Rodriguez?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Rodriguez was killed in action 3 years ago in Afghanistan. Actually, he wasn't. Morrison passed a photograph across the table. This picture was taken yesterday in Langley, Virginia. Sergeant Rodriguez has been operating undercover for the CIA for the past 3 years. Sarah stared at the photo. It was definitely Tommy, though he looked older and bore several obvious scars from reconstructive surgery. He was shaking hands with the Director of Central Intelligence. "I don't understand," Sarah said, though she was beginning to piece together what was happening. Admiral Webb stepped forward. "Colonel, Sergeant Rodriguez was critically wounded in Afghanistan but survived. The CIA recruited him for a deep cover operation to infiltrate terrorist networks. For security reasons, his survival was classified above top secret." "What does this have to do with my team's mission in Syria?" "Everything," Webb replied. "Rodriguez was your team's intelligence support during Operation Sandcastle. He went by the callsign Guardian." Sarah felt the room spinning around her. Tommy had been alive all along. Not only alive, but he'd been the voice guiding her through the most dangerous mission of her career. "Why wasn't I told?" Senator Morrison answered. "Because Rodriguez requested that his identity remain classified until after the mission was complete. He believed you would take unnecessary risks to protect him if you knew who he was." Sarah thought back to the mission, remembering moments when Guardian's intelligence had been almost impossibly accurate. Of course it had been. Tommy knew her so well that he could anticipate her decisions and provide exactly the information she needed. Representative Harrison looked confused. "I still don't see how this changes our assessment of the Women's Special Operations Program." "It changes everything," Webb said. "Rodriguez has submitted a detailed report on Colonel Martinez's team performance. In his assessment, they demonstrated tactical proficiency equal to or exceeding any special operations unit he's worked with, including DevGru and Delta Force." Morrison read from the folder. Rodriguez specifically notes that the team adapted to changing intelligence, modified their approach when confronted with unexpected obstacles, and maintained mission focus under extreme pressure. He recommends immediate expansion of the Women's Special Operations Program. Sarah felt tears threatening but forced them back. Tommy had been watching over them, just like he'd watched over her in Afghanistan. Even after 3 years, he'd still had her back. Harrison wasn't giving up. One mission doesn't prove anything. These women haven't been tested over time, in multiple environments, under sustained pressure. Actually, they have, a new voice said from the back of the room. Sarah turned to see a figure in civilian clothes walking toward the front of the chamber. As he came closer, she recognized him despite the scars and changes. Tommy Rodriguez, alive and whole. "Senators, representatives," Tommy said, "I've been monitoring special operations activities around the world for the past 18 months. I've observed teams from every branch of the military, from every allied nation. Colonel Martinez's unit performs at a level that most teams never reach." He looked directly at Sarah. "More importantly, they perform as a team. They trust each other, they communicate effectively, and they never leave anyone behind. Those qualities can't be taught, they have to be earned." Harrison stood up. "Sergeant, with all due respect, you're hardly an objective observer. You have a personal relationship with Colonel Martinez that dates back years." Tommy nodded. "You're absolutely right. I know Sarah Martinez better than anyone in this room. I've served with her in combat, I've seen her make impossible decisions under fire, and I've watched her carry the weight of her teammates' deaths for 3 years. His voice grew stronger. "I also know that she's the best tactical leader I've ever served under. Male or female doesn't matter, she gets results and she brings her people home alive. Senator Morrison called for a 10-minute recess. As the room emptied, Sarah found herself face to face with Tommy for the first time in 3 years. "Hey, Ghost," he said softly. Sarah couldn't hold back the tears anymore. She wrapped her arms around her old teammate, feeling the reality of his survival sink in. "I thought you were dead. I've been carrying that guilt for 3 years. I know. I'm sorry it had to be that way. The mission required it." Sarah pulled back and looked at him. The scars were extensive, particularly around his left eye and jaw. "How bad was it?" "Bad enough. I was unconscious for 2 months, in rehabilitation for another 6. But the CIA needed someone with my background for the undercover work, and I needed something to focus on besides the pain. Why didn't you contact me sooner?" Tommy smiled, the expression somewhat crooked due to his injuries. "Because I knew you'd blame yourself for what happened to me. You needed to move forward, to build something new. Contacting you would have just pulled you back into the past." Sarah looked around the hearing room. "Is this real? The program, the recognition, the acceptance? It's real. But, Sarah, it's not about proving women can do the job. You've already done that. This is about institutionalizing the change, making sure what you've built survives political pressure and budget cuts." The hearing reconvened with a different atmosphere. Representative Harrison seemed less combative, and several committee members who had remained silent began asking detailed questions about training protocols and selection criteria. Colonel Martinez, Senator Morrison said, "If Congress approves full funding for the Women's Special Operations Program, how quickly could you expand to a full battalion?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "With proper resources, we could train and field 4 complete teams within 18 months. But I'd recommend starting with 2 teams and growing gradually. This isn't about quantity, it's about maintaining standards. What kind of support would you need?" "Dedicated training facilities, specialized equipment designed for female operators, and, most importantly, buy-in from the existing special operations community. We can't succeed if we're fighting our own side." Admiral Webb stepped forward again. "Senator, I've discussed this with commanders from all branches of special operations. There's unanimous agreement that Colonel Martinez's program should continue and expand." Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Admiral, I find that hard to believe. A year ago, these same commanders were insisting women couldn't meet the physical demands of special operations. A year ago, they hadn't seen Colonel Martinez's team in action. Results tend to change minds." Tommy spoke up again. "If I may, Senator, there's something else you should know. During Operation Sandcastle, Colonel Martinez's team was offered multiple opportunities to abort the mission when complications arose. They could have extracted without completing the objective, and no one would have questioned their decision. But they didn't," Morrison said. "No, ma'am. They adapted, they persevered, and they succeeded. Not because they had something to prove, but because completing the mission was the right thing to do." Senator Morrison looked around the room, then directly at Sarah. "Colonel, what do you see as the future of this program?" Sarah stood up, her team rising behind her. "Senator, I see a future where military service members are judged by their capabilities, not their gender. I see women serving in roles that utilize their full potential. But, mostly, I see Americans protecting Americans, regardless of who those Americans happen to be. What about the critics who say women aren't suited for the psychological demands of special operations?" Sarah thought about the nightmares, the guilt, the 3 years of isolation and doubt. "Senator, I've struggled with the psychological demands of this job. So has every special operations veteran I've ever met. Male or female, the work takes a toll. The question isn't whether we can handle it, the question is whether we're willing to accept that toll in service of something greater than ourselves." Morrison nodded and looked around the room. "This committee will reconvene tomorrow to vote on funding for the Women's Special Operations Training Program. Colonel Martinez, you and your team are dismissed with our thanks." Outside the Capitol building, Sarah's team gathered on the steps in the afternoon sunlight. They'd gone from being dismissed as frauds to being recognized by Congress in less than a year. "Ma'am," Kim said, "what happens now?" Sarah looked at each of her team members. "Now we go back to work. We train the next class, we build the program, and we prove this wasn't just luck or a one-time success." Brooks grinned. "Does this mean I can finally tell my mom what I actually do for a living?" "Some of it," Sarah laughed. "The parts that aren't classified." Tommy appeared beside them, looking oddly nervous. "Sarah, can we talk privately for a minute?" They walked away from the group to a quiet corner of the plaza. Tommy seemed to be struggling with what to say. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "I've been offered a new assignment. Joint Task Force Command, working with International Special Operations Units. It's a good opportunity, but it would mean leaving the country for at least 2 years." Sarah felt a stab of loss. She'd just gotten Tommy back, and now he was leaving again. "You should take it. It sounds like exactly the kind of work you're good at. I wanted to make sure you'd be okay. With the program, with everything." Sarah smiled and gestured toward her team, who were engaged in animated conversation about their next training cycle. "I've got everything I need right here." Tommy followed her gaze. "They're good people. The best. They remind me why I got into this business in the first place. To make a difference? To be part of something bigger than myself. To serve with people I trust completely." Tommy extended his hand. "Then, I guess this is goodbye again." Sarah shook her head and pulled him into another hug. "This is see you later. We're family, remember? Family doesn't say goodbye." 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of a new class of female special operations candidates. 24 women from all branches of the military had volunteered for the second iteration of the program. Some were motivated by patriotism, others by personal challenge, and a few by the simple desire to prove that women could excel in any field. Admiral Webb watched from the observation deck as Sarah addressed the new recruits. "You're here because you want to serve your country at the highest level. You're here because you believe you can meet standards that most people consider impossible. Most importantly, you're here because you're willing to sacrifice for something greater than yourselves." Sarah paused and looked at each woman individually. "Some people will question whether you belong here. Some will say you're taking opportunities away from men who deserve them more. Some will claim you're weakening the military by lowering standards." The women listened intently, their faces serious and determined. "Here's what I want you to remember: you're not here to represent all women. You're here to represent yourselves and your commitment to service. You're not here to prove women can do this job, that's already been proven. You're here to learn how to do this job excellently." Kim, now promoted to instructor status, stepped forward. "Your training begins now. You will be pushed beyond what you thought possible. You will question whether you're strong enough, fast enough, tough enough. Some of you will decide this isn't for you, and that's okay. But, for those who stay, for those who earn their place here, you'll join a tradition of service that goes back to the founding of this country." As the new candidates began their first exercise, Sarah received a text message from an unknown number. She opened it and smiled. "Watching the news coverage of your program. Proud of what you've built. Stay safe out there. Guardians." Sarah typed back, "Family doesn't leave family behind." The response came immediately, "Never." Sarah put her phone away and watched the new recruits pushing through obstacles that had once seemed insurmountable to her. The program was growing, the acceptance was building, and the future looked brighter than it had in years. But, most importantly, she was no longer the ghost everyone thought she was. She was Colonel Sarah Martinez, United States Army Special Operations Command, leader of the most elite group of female warriors the world had ever seen. And she was finally home. Epilogue: 1 year later, Sarah stood in the same American Legion Hall where she'd been called a fake SEAL. But, this time, she wasn't alone. Kim, Vasquez, Brooks, and Chen stood with her, all wearing their dress uniforms and the decorations they'd earned in combat. Rick Thompson approached their table, his expression uncertain. "Colonel Martinez? I owe you an apology." Sarah looked up from her beer. No, you don't. I called you a fraud. I said women couldn't be SEALs. I was wrong. Sarah stood up and extended her hand. You were protecting something you believed in. I understand that. But maybe now you can see that expanding who gets to serve doesn't diminish what service means. Rick shook her hand, his grip firm and respectful. I've been reading about your program. About what you've accomplished. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Thank you, Sarah said simply. As Rick walked away, Kim leaned over. How does it feel to be vindicated? Sarah looked around the room, at the veterans who had initially rejected her but were now approaching to shake hands and ask questions about the women's program. It feels like the beginning of something important. What's next for us? Vasquez asked. Sarah smiled and raised her beer. Whatever our country needs us to do. The four women toasted their past, their present, and their future warriors who had proven that courage, skill, and dedication knew no gender boundaries. They had started as outcasts and become heroes, not by changing who they were, but by staying true to their commitment to serve. Outside, the American flag flew in the evening breeze, representing the ideals they had sworn to protect and the people they had dedicated their lives to serving. Sarah Martinez was no longer a ghost haunted by the past, she was a leader building a bridge to the future.